All right, today we're going to do a really deep dive. We're talking a forensic level analysis of a single, powerful verse from the Quran about the prophet Moses. Using our source text as a guide, we're going to systematically unpack the layers of logic, theology, and sheer meaning that are packed into one profound and honestly paradoxical command.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll tackle the paradox at the heart of the divine command. Then, we'll analyze the incredible faith it demanded from a mother. After that, we'll look at the evidence from different sacred narrations, deconstruct the anatomy of a divine call, and finally, we'll explore the very nature of divine knowledge itself. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start with the verse at the very heart of this from Surah Al-Qasas. It presents a command that, on the surface, seems to challenge every bit of human logic and intuition. It really feels like it goes against every instinct a person would have.
So this is it. This is the verse that our source's entire analysis is built around. God inspires Moses' mother and says, "When you fear for him, cast him into the river." And right there, that's the paradox. The divine plan for his safety involves an action that seems to be the very definition of danger.
And that right there, that is the critical question. I mean, our source document really builds its whole case around this. It's a huge paradox. The very moment her fear for his life hits its absolute peak is the exact moment she is commanded to do something that, by any normal human standard, should guarantee his death.
So how in the world do you deconstruct that? Well, the source text argues that this isn't a contradiction at all. It's actually a really profound lesson in the nature of faith and what divine wisdom actually looks like.
Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. The source zeroes in on the specific phrasing, and you can see it highlighted here in the Arabic. The language is so precise. It doesn't say, cast him in the river despite your fear. It says, when you fear for him, cast him. Her fear is presented as the actual direct trigger for the action that ultimately leads to his salvation.
And that just changes everything, doesn't it? The crucial point here is that the entire act gets recontextualized. It's no longer an act of abandonment that's driven by despair. No, it becomes an act of supreme trust, a complete submission to a divine plan that's operating on a logic that's just way beyond our human comprehension. Her fear becomes the catalyst for her faith.
And you know, this isn't a one-off thing. The source text points out this pattern across different sacred stories. Just look at the parallel with Mary, the mother of Jesus. She's told to shake a dry, dead palm trunk to get food. In both stories, the command just defies conventional logic. And in both cases, acting on that faith, especially when faced with something that seems impossible, is exactly what unlocks the divine miracle. Now, since this is a forensic analysis, our source doesn't just stop at the theological meaning. It backs up its case by meticulously going through the historical details that we find in different sacred narrations.
So the source dives into a really specific point where text can vary the exact amount of time Moses was with his mother. Now, this might seem like a tiny detail, but for textual analysts, understanding these little differences is absolutely key to building a complete picture.
And as the source documents, you get different time frames from different traditions. One narration suggests it was a really short period, which kind of emphasizes the immediacy of the command and the mother's faith. But an alternate narration says it was 3 months, which highlights something different, a long period of hidden fear before that final act of trust. The source presents these not as contradictions, but more like complementary data points that make the whole story richer.
Okay, so from there, the analysis in the source text makes a really cool shift. We move from an event to a very specific location. It performs this incredibly detailed, almost geographical and linguistic breakdown of the moment Moses is called by God at the burning bush.
So while you can see the full Arabic description here from the source, the main takeaway is that the text isn't treated as just some poetic scenery. Not at all. It's treated like a set of precise coordinates, where every single term has this immense theological significance, defining the sacred space more and more specifically.
And this step-by-step deconstruction from the source is just fascinating. It's like we're zooming in. It's not just in a valley. It's in the valley, then on the right side of the valley, then in a specific blessed spot on that side, and finally originating from the tree in that spot. Each phrase is another layer, another zoom in, adding sanctity and precision.
So the crucial point that the source makes here is in that tiny preposition, from. The call came from the tree, using it as a focal point for the miracle, but the tree itself was not God, and that is a critical theological distinction. It keeps the divine transcendent. The location is a vessel, not the divine essence itself.
And for our last section, the source text takes us from the historical and the linguistic all the way to the philosophical. It presents an analysis of the very nature, the type, of knowledge that Moses received in that moment.
So to explain this, the source introduces this fundamental distinction between two types of knowledge. On one hand, you've got what's called acquired knowledge. That's how we learn most things, through concepts, descriptions, inference. But then there's another kind, presentational knowledge. This is a direct, unmediated witnessing of a reality. The example is perfect. A doctor knows about pain from symptoms, but the patient knows the pain directly. And this distinction is what makes the event so transformative for Moses. His was the second kind of knowledge. He didn't just learn a new fact or hear a good argument for God's existence. He had a direct, unmediated perception of a divine reality. It wasn't an idea, it was a pure experience. So this was the content of that direct perception. It wasn't a proposition to be debated or analyzed through logic. It was a reality to be witnessed. It was the ultimate presentational knowledge, where the knower and the known become directly connected. And so that brings us full circle, right back to where we started, but with a new question. From a mother's act of faith that seems to defy all logic, to a prophet's direct witnessing of the divine, this whole forensic analysis from our source material really forces us to think about that boundary. Where does our human logic end, and where does divine wisdom begin?